Hello, I'm Bob Harris. Welcome to Durham's educational series for industrial and decorative concrete flooring systems. In this video series, we're going to discuss making samples. Oftentimes, clients want to see a finished piece. By making your own samples, it's going to help develop your skill, but also you could use this as a sales tool. Invite your clients to your showroom. If you don't have a showroom, you can carry them. They're lightweight. So we're going to talk about making samples. So this is 1/4 inch MDF board purchased at your local big box store. And then what we did is once we cut it, I just took a little bit of solvent and I wiped off the dust. And now what we're going to do is we're going to seal the MDF board with CP1000. It's very important that you put 2 applications of CP1000 primer down, and that's going to help for a couple of things. Number one, adhesion, but more importantly, it's going to help prevent outgassing or pinholing. And so right now we're going to roll it down. On one sample, we're going to go with a regular Skraffino followed by a Skraffino Superfine. And on this sample, we're going to use Uberdek followed by Skraffino Superfine. So this is the start of how we produce some samples. Roughly 1 hour has elapsed. Now we're putting our second application of CP1000 over our sample board. And once this application is dry, we're ready to move on to our regular Skraffino and our Uberdek applications. All right, remember what we did is we put 2 coats of CP1000 over our MDF board. It's dry to the touch. Now it's time to make up our sample material. What's nice is you can make up, small quantities or small batches. I'll show you real quick. Let me get the scale. So for example, you can just use this traditional gram scale, and what you'll do is you'll turn the machine on, you'll get an empty bucket, you'll put the bucket on there, and you'll see some weight, assuming you have it set to grams, and then you hit tare. What that does is it zeroes the scale back to 0, and then in our case, we have 450 grams or 1 pound of Uberdek. So it's a small quantity, so you're not wasting an entire batch, which is really nice for making small samples. This quantity would probably almost make 2 samples, just FYI. So have plenty of boards there. It gives you additional practice. And you can go from there. All right, we have 150 mLs. If you look on the side of the container here, it says mLs, or if you want to, you can convert that to ounces, but right here it's 150 mLs. And then we're using aqua color, the color putty, and we have 20 mLs of that color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the color putty, aqua color, put it into the CP1000. And by the way, we wrote this down for you, so you guys, you don't have to remember that. This is the mix ratio. So it's 450 grams of the Uberdek white. It's 150 mLs of the CP1000 and 20 mLs of the putty colorant. So we're going to give this just a quick spin. It's about all you need. It's already mixed. Then I'm going to take the full contents of our CP1000 that has color in it, put it into our 450 grams of white Uberdek, and just from past experiences, it looks like it's exactly where it needs to be. It's a good mix ratio. Give it a good solid 2 to 3 minutes mixing. Normally we're mixing 3 to 4 minutes, but we're mixing such a small quantity, you don't have to go the full 4 minutes. All right. Really, it's a matter of personal preference in terms of the tool that you use. So oftentimes I'm trying to put a nice seamless pattern down. So what I like to do is use just a traditional pool trowel. It's referred to as a pool trowel because of the rounded edges. I'll just lay it out there kind of quick, and then I'll just finish it off with a magic trowel. Or if you choose to, you could just simply use a magic trowel as well. So it's kind of personal preference on the tool that you use. So you can see the consistency of the material. Remember, this is Uberdek white. Actually, it looks like it's a little thicker, so this is about the appropriate amount of material. Where I earlier said you might get 2 sample boards, it looks like this is going to be just right for this one sample board. Just a little bit more. All right. Keep in mind, you want to make your sample board as professional looking as possible, which means that you definitely should be concerned about the edges. So once the material tightens up a little bit, we'll make sure and scrape the edges. Sometimes if you want, you can wait till the following day and just take a 5-in-1 tool or a margin trowel or something rigid to scrape the edges. So you want your samples to be very presentable, because oftentimes you're going to use this as a sales tool to your advantage. Okay, now it could be like that, or if you want to just give it one last smooth. And that's about it on that one. So we'll let that dry. Once it's dry, we're going to prime with CP1000, and then we're going to put a coat of Skraffino Superfine over the top of the Uberdek white that's been tinted with putty. All right, our first sample, we just demonstrated the Uberdek. Now we're going to go with Skraffino white. Now our mix ratios are as follows. I showed you the mix design for the Uberdek. So on our Skraffino, we're looking at the same 450 grams of the white Skraffino. We're looking at between 125 to 150 mLs on the CP1000. And then we're using Shenandoah taupe, and it has 15 grams of color fast. So where we used the aqua color, which was a liquid, over on the Uberdek, now we're switching over to a powdered form of pigment, and that is the color fast pigment. So once again, I'm going to take the powder and mix it into our 150 mLs of CP1000. It's about all it takes. It's such a small volume, you don't have to overmix or mix as long as if we're making a full batch. So I'm going to dump the full contents, which is our 150 mLs, into our 450 grams of the white Skraffino. And as you saw with the Uberdek, that worked out pretty well in terms of the consistency or the viscosity of the material. Remember, on a full batch, if you're mixing a full bag of either Uberdek or Skraffino, 3 to 4 minutes mixing. Because it's such a small volume, it's only 1 pound of material, you're fine mixing for 2 minutes. As we talked about earlier, personal preference on your method of putting the material down. You can use the hand trowel, you can use a smaller trowel, or the magic trowel. For samples, I like a combination of both. You saw me on the Uberdek put it down with a hand trowel, followed by smoothing it off with a magic trowel. Seems to put it down without any ridges or trowel lines very nicely. So it's interesting, you can see the different consistency from this product, which is the Skraffino regular, compared to the Uberdek. The Uberdek has a little bit more texture to it, a little more body, and the reality of it is it's just a different look. This type of system with a base coat of regular Skraffino followed by Skraffino Superfine, gives you more of an organic look. Sometimes you'll see the trowel movement or you'll see variation in this. And if you don't want that variation, that's where you would consider going with the Uberdek, because when we put the Skraffino Superfine down over the Uberdek, it's going to pretty much be trowel free. You're not going to see as much movement as you'll see with the Skraffino system. Again, just about the appropriate amount of material for the size of this sample board, and it's 450 grams of Skraffino, and very little bit left over. So that's good use of your material. So it's a very effective way of producing your samples without wasting a lot of material. I would highly encourage you during a downtime, maybe it's a rainy day or you're in between projects or even on a weekend, consider making up multiple samples so you have several colors to choose from, and you might even consider offering several textures as well. So this doesn't always have to be troweled smooth. You could actually do a finish like this, for example, and just lightly knock it down. And now we've got a beautiful textured surface. See that? So it almost looks like a travertine tile. So there's a variety of different techniques that you could do, and if you put aqua color over that, it'd be a really nice surface because the aqua color would go down in the low areas. For our sample purposes, we're going to just demonstrate putting it down smooth. Once again, not mandatory, but if you choose to, finish it one time like that. Once that dries, we'll go ahead and prime with CP1000. And when the CP1000 is dry to the touch, we'll come back over the top of that with our last and final coat of Skraffino Superfine, and then we'll talk about the sealers over the top of that. All right, we're priming over the top of our sample boards. As a recap, we did 2 coats of CP1000 over the MDF board. On this panel, we used Skraffino regular with Shenandoah taupe color fast pigment. And then on our Uberdek, we used putty aqua color mixed into the CP1000. And now we're priming over the top of both the Skraffino regular and the Uberdek. And then once the CP has had sufficient dry time, which in these conditions is going to be about 30 or 40 minutes for our samples, we're going to come back over the top with our last application of cementitious product. In this case, it'll be Skraffino regular, and over here it's going to be Skraffino Superfine. And tomorrow we'll come back, and if they need a light sanding, we'll go ahead and get our final top coats and call our sample boards finished. So as I mentioned earlier in the video, it's a great idea to go ahead and take time and make a multitude of sample boards. When Leanne and I were professionally installing, we would have literally 20 or 30 different sample boards with a variety of different colors and textures, enabling the client to be able to touch it and feel it and choose their color selection. Our CP1000 has dried for roughly 30 minutes over the top of our Uberdek and our Skraffino regular. Now it's time to come back with, in this case, Skraffino Superfine over the top of the Uberdek, and then Skraffino Fine over the top of the Skraffino regular. As a recap, we showed you the mix ratios, so we're more or less using the same mix design consisting of 450 grams of the Uberdek. We have 150 mLs of the CP1000, 20 mLs of the Color Fast, or excuse me, Aqua Color putty, and then we just have a little bit of additional CP1000 in the event that we need it. Same thing over here, it's all the same mix ratios. The only thing that's different is we have Shenandoah taupe, and it's 15 grams of the Shenandoah taupe Color Fast pigment. So we're going to go ahead and mix our aqua color into the CP1000, just as we did earlier. As I talked about, very little mixing is required. It almost mixed itself just by dumping the liquid in there. So that's about the extent of the mixing. So we're taking our 150 mLs of the colored CP1000 into the white Uberdek tinted with putty aqua color. And we're just going to loosen that up ever so slightly. Remember, if you're making a full batch, 3 to 4 minutes mixing. This is such a small batch, 450 grams or 1 pound. We'll mix for 2 minutes and that should be sufficient. Now, keep in mind, why are we demonstrating both applications? It's a different look. So if you're going for a more homogeneous look that doesn't have any trowel lines or marks, this is where you want to go with the Uberdek, followed with the coat of the Skraffino Superfine. And as an option, if you choose to, you can come in here with a magic trowel and give it this. Whereas when we go with the Skraffino regular over, or the Skraffino fine over the regular, it's a much more organic look where there's movement to it. Sometimes you'll see a little bit of surface texture, which oftentimes is desirable to certain clients. So that's the reason for, you know, choosing one system over the next system. All right, Shenandoah taupe, color fast, dry pigment mixed into 150 mLs of CP 1000, which is then mixed into 450 grams or 1 pound of Skraffino white fine. Earlier in the video I had mentioned super fine, and we're actually, just to clarify, we're going with Skraffino fine over the top of the Skraffino regular, just to clarify. Okay, so once again, to finish this one off, if you choose to, we can come back with a magic trowel. Now, a word of caution on your samples. If you make your samples perfectly pristine and you sell a project off of that sample, that's going to be what the expectation is for your client. So I like to intentionally, you know, leave a little bit of variation in the sample, so you're demonstrating a realistic expectation of what can be expected on the floor. It's very simple to make a perfect looking sample on a 2 foot by 2 foot square like we have here, but now to convey that onto 1,000 square feet or more sometimes is very difficult. So when you make your samples, do it with the mindset that the samples has to be the best representative of what's going to happen out on the actual floor. So we're going to let these cure, a full cure, until the next day, and then we're going to come back, and if we need to do a light sanding on it, that's what we're going to do. and then we'll finish them off with our top coats. The purpose of this video is to show you quick and effective ways of creating samples, making small batches. Keep in mind, for demonstration purposes, we were only putting the 20 mLs of the aqua color or the 15 grams of the Color Fast pigment as an example. So you certainly can add more or less pigment when you're making a full batch. That's the reason we're doing these samples. Now, we put the material down on the Uberdek and the Skraffino fine over here, and the Skraffino Superfine here. Really nice. There's not any trowel ridges and stuff. However, you know, sometimes you may need to get in with a palm sander and sand these, typically you know, around 100 grit, 150 grit, just a light sanding and get the residual dust off, and then get into your sealing, which is what we're about to do right now. So we're going to seal these with the Purdue A03, which is a water-based acrylic, and that material needs to dry for approximately 30 minutes to an hour, depending on the conditions. Obviously, in cooler conditions or a basement where you have a damp environment, you're going to want to wait longer to make sure it's fully cured. On a commercial application, once the A03 has sufficiently dried, you're going to want to put the E32 water-based epoxy down and give that the sufficient drying time, as we've talked about in several of the videos. And then once this cures, we're going to go back over the top of it with our U46 or our U45. The U45 is the matte water-based polyurethane, and the U46 is the gloss water-based urethane. We have our A03 water-based acrylic in a pump sprayer. Obviously, on smaller samples like this, you can just use a roller tray and just dip and roll if you choose to. But we had it in the sprayer, is why I'm spraying it here. So we're going to just put it down using a weenie roller here. Our A03 has dried for approximately 1 hour over the top of the Skraffino Fine and the Skraffino Superfine. Now we're getting ready to apply our Purdue U45, which is our matte version of our water-based polyurethane. In this cup, we have 100 mLs of the A side and 25 mLs of the B side. So we're going to, you know, dump the B into the A, and we're going to mix for approximately 3 to 4 minutes. And then we're going to apply it onto our panels here. Remember, the coverage rate is between 350 to 400 square feet per coat per gallon. So we want to make sure we get all of the contents of the B into the A here. And then we'll go ahead and give it a good thorough mixing. On such a small quantity here, you don't want to whip air into it by going too high of an RPM on the drill. You can see I'm going slow to medium, basically, keeping the drill paddle completely submerged. I'm not lifting it up and down. When you're creating your samples, you really want to look at it in all angles of the lights. Sometimes it's depending on the lighting where you're working, it may be difficult to make sure you're getting full coverage. So look at it from different angles. Make sure you're in fact getting the whole panel coated.